Valley State Prison, Soledad, California. This call and your telephone number will be monitored and recorded. To accept this call, say or dial 5 now.
Can you say hi?
Thank you for using Global Tel Link.
Lazor.
Hello.
Hi, how are you tonight?
Hi, Aaron. I'm okay. Do you know I just talked to Rudy a couple times just a short time ago?
No, I've been upstairs and he's been down.
No, but we're here and everything's going. So
Okay.
we're
okay.
we're
yeah,
both here.
I hope you don't mind. I had an opportunity, so I thought I'd jump right on it.
No problem.
Shall I? How are you, Aaron?
So far, so good. I'm not in prison. I don't complain. I'm not in prison.
Very good. Rudy, shall I continue on with where I left off?
You bet. You bet. You got the floor, and say what you need to say.
Okay, interject if you need to, or if you feel you want to. As I was saying, I explained what a shot caller is. I guess a better way to explain that, the military is not a bad example, but if you look at the drug lords in Colombia and South America, they have their main man, and then he has somebody he delegates bad things to do, and that man has other guys under him. It's that same thing. These are gangs. And so that's where they get that shot caller term. I guess it's much like the old gangsters like Al Capone and Frank Nitti, probably. Okay, going back to where I was, Sentinella, 1999 to 2001. Another matter of the guard named Grady. In the year 2000, I was scheduled for parole hearing, and he knew it. And I had a 5-year set-off from my previous hearing until that one, but they were on the verge of adjusting that to where I could go back to the board after just 2 or 2.5 years, half that time. And Grady saw an opportunity to stop that to make sure I didn't get the parole hearing set and wouldn't get granted parole if I got a rule violation report. So he set me up with a false rule violation report, theft of state food. And what it was the guards that night wanted to get back to watch their TV shows, and I was along with about 12 other people at the end of the food line, and so they told us, put this stuff in these plastic bags and take it back to your cell. And all of us did, and as we walked out the door, everybody else was allowed to go except me. They grabbed my stuff, threw it up on the roof of the prison, and jacked me up against the wall, handcuffed me up, and wrote me a rule violation report for theft of state food. And for that, I've now paid 18 years more of prison, actually about 20.5 years more prison for that false rule violation report. He also gathered together his sidekick, a guy named Wilson, another cop named Wilson, who was part of that little scheme. And Wilson had eye pupils dilated right about to the ends of the iris or whatever it is in the eye, where he was evidently high on drugs constantly while he worked there in the prison. And they also brought into that little trinity of them Sergeant Branham, who was instrumental in making sure I got found guilty of that rule violation report too. As a result of that, I didn't get parole. I didn't get the earlier parole hearing, and as a result of that, it's just gone on and on where I've been denied parole ever since. So had they not written that false rule violation report, I would no doubt have gotten parole granted in the year 2002 or thereabouts and gone home then. Let me go on to the next one. Also at Sentinella, June and July of 1999. Oh, I went from Sentinella. Hang on just a second. Oh, yeah, at Sentinella. This is a really interesting one because it involves a religious pastor who was extremely corrupt. He was either Southern Baptist or Baptist. I don't know much about the difference between the two. I was the clerk for all of the chaplains at the prison there in Sentinella, which means Muslims, Catholic priest, the Protestants, who was a man named Steve Francis, was the Protestant minister there. And Steve originally liked me, but when he found out I used Yahweh's name and used Yeshua's name, they had something really horribly against that, and he turned on me and became really evil and vicious, even kind of violently attacked me a couple of times in the chapel for no reason except to try to set me up maybe with a response, a reaction to him, where he could set me up with an accusation of violence, but I never bought into that bait. What happened was I went out to court. I was in a car accident with CDC back in 1994, where their chase car behind us smashed into the car I was in because they were horseplaying and chipped a bone in my elbow, wrecked my back and neck, and so on. So I had a lawsuit on that, and I went out to court for the lawsuit. While I was out to court, Steve Francis, the Protestant minister, was telling the whole congregation, picture about 150 hard convicts, but they're guys trying to reform by being Christians, and they're in this auditorium of the chapel, and he's telling them, I'm asking all of you to pray that something bad will happen to Lazor on this trip to court and back, so that he doesn't make it back here, or at least is no longer able to function as a clerk, so he's not going to be the clerk any longer in here. And I was an excellent clerk. I had great chronos and reports from all the other chaplains except him. So he actually did that, asked them to pray against me, and something bad would happen to me. And as it happened, something sort of did, although it didn't affect my position there when I came back. So I was denied parole at the next parole hearing because of that Steve Francis chrono. He didn't write me a 115, he wrote me a lighter rule violation, sort of quasi-rule violation report, saying that I was using my chaplain clerk position for typing up documents that weren't part of my job, which is an out-and-out lie. I later got reports from all of the other chaplains stating that was an out-and-out lie, but it was too late. They had already denied me parole and put me off many additional years, or put me off, I think, several additional years. And you'll see when you get that transcript, an older transcript, Rudy, you'll see that the parole board made a big deal of it. Well, wow, this is a man of the cloth even saying this against you. You're a terrible person, sort of a thing. Now I want to compare that, moving forward a number of years. There's a Catholic priest in the year 2014 that verified that I was with him in the chapel doing a chapel function right where I was supposed to be when they wrote me a false rule violation report saying I was on the yard, and for that stole over $1,000 worth of my property, saying they could legally take it as punishment, and also lost my parole over that. And yet they refused.
This call and your telephone number will be monitored and recorded.
The double standard, they refused to let him testify. They took his memo that he wrote and threw it away, although I've got copies of it. There are plenty of copies of it out there now. So you see the double standard. When one preacher was lying against me, the parole board used it against me. When one was telling the truth in my favor, they wouldn't even acknowledge it. So let me move on to the next one, Pelican Bay State Prison. When I went out to court for that car accident lawsuit on the 4th of July, 1999, I just sent you a piece of mail with a rule violation report, not the report itself, but where it was reversed. It's one of only 2 times in my 60-some false rule violation reports that I got fairness from a warden. A warden Ayres, A-Y-R-E-S. He's actually a very good man. He was a good man all the way up to his warden position. He retired not long ago. He reversed it, and you'll see the reversal and why. It was obvious that I was a victim of an attack, but the cops were in on a hit contract out on me that was left over from earlier up at Pelican Bay that I mentioned earlier tonight. And based on that, they wanted me to at least be found guilty. The guy that jumped on me, he was supposed to stab me, but he was new at it. It was his first time, and he didn't have the heart to do it, so he just jumped on me with his fist. But you'll see where that rule violation report was reversed. You'll see the actual reversal papers by Warden Ayres years after the event. And, you got to ask questions like, why did this even have to make it up to a warden's level several levels later to get reversed when it was obvious that I hadn't done anything, was just a victim of this? And they do this constantly to me. Not lately, but they have for years and years and years. Also, let's see, there's something else I wanted to mention in there. Let's see, let me think for a second and look over my notes here. I don't remember what it was, so maybe it'll pop up again later. I'll go on to the next thing. In Lancaster State Prison on 11/10/2001, a worker that worked in a laundry room a black lady named Gail, I think her last name is Grace, that's what I've been told, Gail Grace. We just called her chain smoker Gail. She conspired with an inmate, I won't give his name, he was part of the Mexican mafia among the prisoners, to stir up some of the white power guys, because I'm white, so they were supposed to be the ones taking care of me, to gave them false information that I had filed a complaint that affected some of the laundry room workers who were inmates, which is a lie. I never even filed a complaint on it. and they attacked me, jumped me, downed me. Several of them stomped my head in, and couldn't even recognize my face in a mirror. Couldn't even recognize my own face for the next couple of days. There's an interesting story in what happened with that. No medical attention whatsoever for 2 days, and on the second day, when they were promised they'd come and bring the medical attention, I was passing out, having seizures and whatnot. They put me on a bus. Coincidental timing. They put me on a bus for an out to court for some other matter. And by the time I got back weeks later, they just let the whole thing go and never did any testing on my brain or anything, any intervention for about 1.5 to 2 years.
This call and your telephone number will be monitored and recorded.
Give details on maybe in a letter later. Going on to one more at Corcoran State Prison in 2013. Crossing my parole again, I was set up with an attack by an inmate named Brian Casillas, who is a very mentally ill person who had attacked 3 out of his 4 last cellmates in the middle of the night. And so they put him in my cell and asked him to do the same to me, and he did. And all I did is I put him in I used to be fairly strong, even though I'm not a very big guy. I put him in a bear hug and kept slamming on the door, my cup on the door to get the guard's attention. It was about 2:30 in the morning, and finally got the guard's attention, sleeping up in the tower, and he, pushed his alarm button, and got the guards over there to take that guy out of the cell. Sort of long story short, I was told they knew I didn't do anything wrong. They took Casillas away. The next morning, though, they brought on the crew that was part of the setup, and another different sergeant. They issued me a rule violation report, found me guilty, and I lost my parole of that. That was the first time in something like 15 years I'd been accused of any actual fighting or anything like that. Because I walk away from them, and if somebody clocks me right in the head or in the face, I'll walk away instead of doing what I should do, fight back, but I won't do it. And so that one time, though, I did the right thing. I held the guy in a bear hug, got the cops there to break it up and get him out of there, and yet I still got found guilty. At Corcoran again, half a year or so later, 2014, a guard named Rodriguez had been stalking me. He was part of the old Green Wall gang here at Salinas Valley. He had been stalking me since he found I was at that prison right after I got there, and he kept trying to set me up with things. He screamed out in front of about 50 prisoners one time that I had caused him. He was the package officer that passes out packages that we get, care packages. He screamed out to them all that I was responsible for them not getting their package that week, and basically trying to get a whole gang of people to stab me and do a little melee, but they didn't give in to that. So he wasn't happy with the fact that he didn't get it, so he escalated it up to falsifying a rule violation report on me, saying I didn't show up for a psych appointment, which in fact I did show up for. They wouldn't let me have the psych come in and testify that I showed up for the appointment, so they found me guilty, saying it was irrelevant to bring her in. They found me guilty of it and lost my parole over that. Shortly, let's see, either one more rule violation report after that, and then a third one, I think it was. The next one I've written down here. Yeah, I'm skipping. I'm not doing everything in order. There are thousands of things that took place in between these that are just as important, but these were the key ones I drew out of my memory. So, again, just a few days after I got found guilty of that one, they found me guilty of being on the yard when I wasn't supposed to be, because the punishment for the other one barred me from being on the yard at that time. The fact is, I wasn't on the yard. I was in the chapel interviewing for a job as a clerk before a Catholic priest named Vanissary, who I just said a little while ago earlier, was the one who had written reports and asked them to let him come in as a witness and testify, because he was mad at the cops for obviously falsifying rule violation reports against me. They said in the hearing he was irrelevant as a witness, that his memo was irrelevant, his report was irrelevant. They threw it all out, tried to destroy it.
You have 60 seconds remaining.
And I'll end there for tonight.
Hey,
So there's three rule violations, but they're all cost me parole.
Wow, it's amazing. Can you hear me? Okay, Free?
Yeah, this is. Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I can hear you now.
There's a movie came out about 2 years ago called The Stanford Experiment. My wife and I are just about to watch it before we go to bed tonight, and we'll do a movie review. But I believe that you're right.
You have 30 seconds remaining.
It sounds like
Is that the Zimbardo thing?
it's a movie. I think it was done on.
The Zimbardo.
I don't know the producer. I'll have to tell you next time you call.
No. I mean, Zimbardo's the sociologist that did that prison study.
Oh, okay. Yeah, they made a movie. They made a movie. They made an entire movie out of that prison study, and it's all about how good guards turn bad.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't know that.
It cuts them off, and I hate that. And I've only got one bar on my telephone, and I'm always worried he can't hear me. I changed from AT&T to Metro PCS, and my coverage in the house isn't really the best, but it seems to work most of the time. All right, take care. God bless.